Hey YouTube, Alex Conley here, and in today's video I want to talk about some of the disadvantages of leaving your hometown. Now in a previous video, if you want to go check that one out, I talked about some of the advantages of leaving your hometown. In this video I'm going to mix it up. I'm going to give the downsides. So the first and most obvious downside is cost. It's not going to be cheap to leave your hometown. Even if you're just moving, let's say 30 minutes, an hour away, you're going to have to pay for transporting your things to the new destination. You're going to have to find, new service providers in some cases. You're going to have to find new grocery stores. Maybe if you're moving to a more affluent area, you're going to have to be paying a higher premium for different things. So not only is it going to cost you in the sense that you're going to have to pay to move your things, maybe you have to get a moving truck, but then the cost of things may go up as well. And this could be more extreme if you're moving cross country. I mean, you can pay like $1,000 and $2,000 for a moving truck depending on how far you're going. So next, this is kind of something some people may not think about, and I didn't really think about when I left my hometown. But you could be very well, be losing and leaving connections. You probably will. I mean, just as an example, I know a couple of lawyers in my hometown where if I need legal advice, if I need to hire an attorney and they can't do the job for me, they can refer me to good attorneys. Now, fortunately, when I left my hometown, in the new areas that I lived in, I didn't need legal work, but if I had, that would have been a big concern, is who can I trust, who can I turn to do this kind of work? Whereas in my hometown, I had some obvious choices. Similarly, I knew a couple of different farmers in my hometown where if I wanted to pick up goods at the farmer's market and the farmer's market was closed for whatever reason, I could just contact these farmers and go and get this produce, high quality produce at a reasonable price. That's not so easy when you're not in your hometown anymore. Next, you're not going to see people as often. People that you grew up around, people that you enjoy spending time with, family members, etc. You're simply not going to see them as often. I moved about 1,000 miles away, roughly 2,200 kilometers away. And so it's, rather than just a 20, 30-minute drive to see most of the people I knew, you're talking about an all-day thing. It's a several-hour flight. Upon arrival, maybe those people are at work. Maybe I have to take a cab. Maybe I have to, crash on couches instead of being able to drive home at the end of the evening and sleep in my own bed. So there's, it adds a lot of complexity to visiting people that you know and you care about. And conversely, if you move to an expensive area, you may not have the space or resources to host friends and family, and they may not be able to afford to come and visit you either. Like as an example, I've never lived in New York City, but if I had moved to New York City and I was, renting a small room, it's not so likely that it would be easy for me to host people. There might not be space in the apartment. Roommates might not be cool with a lot of guests. These types of things are real concerns when you're leaving your hometown, whereas if you do live in your hometown, you want to have guests over, it's assumed that they can go home, at the end of the evening, and there's not going to be any problem with them having a place to stay, finding a place to, sleep, etc. If they need to crash on your couch, you know that they can get home the next day. But these things become more complicated when, you live on the other side of the country. Next, when it comes to education, one of the advantages of going to college in your home state or your hometown is that you're a resident of that state. So you're going to qualify for in-state tuition when it comes to getting an education. But you live in another state, their qualification for residency may be that you've lived in that state for a year or two, but that might not actually start until you get a driver's license. So let's say you go and get a driver's license. Okay, now I'm a resident. Well, in some cases, you may not be qualified for in-state tuition, so you may have to wait an additional year or two to even qualify for that discounted tuition rate, and that could make a difference of thousands upon thousands of dollars. And this is compounded if you move to a more expensive area. If you're living somewhere that's more expensive than where you're from, not only could you be paying more in tuition, but you could be paying more in rent, food, gasoline, etc. So leaving your hometown can get quite expensive. Next, in your hometown, you're considered a local, a native. People will regard you, oh man, this guy grew up here, he's one of us. You have that kind of in-group favor. But now, if you're not living there anymore, you're going to be seen as another transplant. This is particularly true. Let's say if you're from California, you're leaving California, there's a lot of resentment that is directed toward Californians for various reasons. I think it's kind of basic, base level thinking to judge people on simply based on the state that they're from. But there is some negative sentiment toward California and surrounding states like Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Texas, with the argument that because Californian people are used to higher costs of living, they can afford to spend more on various things. It causes things to cost more. So if, let's say you had stayed in California, well, you're from California, you're regarded as a local, et cetera. But now if you move to one of these surrounding states, you may get negative feelings and resentment directed toward you because you're not a local. You're not a local anymore. You're a transplant. Next, depending on where you move from and where you're moving to, you may get negative stereotypes directed at you. So where I'm from is fairly diverse. I'm from Nashville. They said Nashville actually most closely mirrors the demographic breakdown of the United States as a whole, which I find really interesting. But now I've lived in some areas that are, basically monocultural, monoethnic, and when I moved to, I briefly lived in a rural area in the Mountain West. I was asked point blank, like one of my first days there, are you Muslim? Now there's nothing wrong with being Muslim. There's nothing wrong with following the teachings of Islam. But now that was not directed as a curiosity thing. That was directed as a loaded question, I'm sure if I, had said yes, the next question might have been, well, or the next statement might have been, well, you shouldn't try to convert us, or, don't think about building a mosque. This type of negative sentiment that is really undue. If I had been Muslim, who cares, But in this area, it was predominantly something like 99% Anglo-American people, and they were not open to the idea of somebody of a different background coming in, and they wanted to make it clear that this was the case. Now, I was born in the United States. I've lived in the United States my whole life, and so that was particularly strange to me because it was almost also phrased as a sort of "Are you a foreigner?" type question, which nothing wrong with foreigners, but this is an experience that you can have if you leave your hometown. If you're used to being around a diverse group of people, like I am in Nashville, I have friends of all different backgrounds, different religions. Not only do I have friends that are Muslim, I have friends that are Jewish. I have friends that are atheists. I have friends that are Christian. I have friends of all different backgrounds. I'm used to interacting with people of different backgrounds, and asking a question about somebody's religion never comes up. I don't have. To me, that's it's not crucial. It's not crucial to having a relationship, a friendly relationship with somebody. But if you move to an area that has different dynamics going on, you could very well have that type of experience. And kind of alongside that, in the same town, a buddy of mine, he was at the grocery store. Now, this individual is an Italian American. But he was asked, he was actually shouted at, a young man in the grocery store pointed and shouted at him, "Oh, look, he must be Muslim." Now, that's just, I don't want to harp on this, but it's important to realize that depending on where you move, they may not have the attitudes, the open-mindedness that you're used to. Okay, so kind of the next point I mentioned before, moving from a lower cost area to a higher cost area, things may get more expensive. If you're moving let's say you're moving from rural Alabama to Manhattan, to New York City, you're going to notice things get a lot more expensive. Whereas in rural Alabama, you may have been able to park for free. You may have to budget for $400 or $500 a month a parking bill. Now, of course, if you've been offered a job in Manhattan, you probably have specialized skills. Your salary is probably going to cover your rent and things like that. But if you're used to, say, going out to a restaurant and spending $5 to $10 on a meal, if you move to New York City, that same meal could cost double or triple the price that you're used to paying. So it could get a lot more expensive for the same thing. So you may have to change around your lifestyle. You may have to downgrade certain things. You have to sell your truck. You know, if you're used to driving a large truck in a rural area and being able to kind of cruise and enjoy that. Well, if you're, you know, in New York, the streets are pretty tight. It could be a giant pain in the rear end to drive a large vehicle, to pay for the gasoline for a large vehicle. Gasoline's very expensive in New York. You know, same with California. Gas is really expensive in California. Some areas, like San Francisco is a good example. It's not fun to drive a big vehicle in San Francisco. I've never even driven a car in San Francisco. I lived there for almost a year, and I was willing to drive in the surrounding areas, but driving in the city was, I mean, you could just see people having a hard time with it, having to go up hills, having to brake hard when they're going down a hill, having to turn their wheels when they park. It's a chore. It's not exciting. Maybe it's exciting the first time, but after the first time, it's quickly going to become an expensive chore. You're going to pay a premium for parking in these areas. Next, depending on how far you go, now let's say you're leaving your hometown for another country, the language may change. Maybe you're used to conversing in English, being able to go up to anybody and speak English with them. Well, if you move to, say, Spain, where Spanish is the predominant language, now there is English in Spain, but you may not be, let's say you move to a smaller town region where English is less prevalent, you're not moving to Madrid or Barcelona, you may not be able to count on speaking English with everybody. You may have to learn a new language. You may have to learn Spanish to have a good experience in this area. The currency may change. So if you're moving to Sweden, you're going to start using the kroner. You're going to have to start converting your US dollars to Swedish kroner. You're not going to be able to just go in and slap, dollars on the counter. You're not going to be able to look at prices and, oh, okay, $5, okay, here's $5. You're going to have to do the math. How much does this cost? And back to my previous statement, things may be a lot more expensive. In Sweden and Scandinavia in particular, this is absolutely true of restaurants. You may have to end up paying a lot more. You're going to end up having to pay a lot more for food, and not just in the sense of converting dollars to kroner, but even the dollar amount is going to be greater than what you're used to in the United States. So keep in mind that when you are doing the math on paying for various things, that you're going to have to convert your home currency to your new currency, and the conversion rates may not always be favorable. Next, food. If you're from the United States and you're used to being able to eat certain kinds of food, being able to acquire certain kinds of groceries at the grocery store, certain things being seasonal, certain things being in stock during certain times of year, that could change. That could completely change. Depending on the country you go to, you may end up paying a premium for fresh produce. An example of this is in the United States, bananas are really cheap. I mean, bananas you get for 40, 45 cents a pound in my home state in Tennessee. That's a common price. Now, I went to Japan recently. You'll pay $1 for a banana. Unless the bananas are on some kind of super special sale, they're about to go bad, you're gonna pay like $1 per banana. That's a lot more expensive. So you're used to having a banana with your breakfast every morning. Your food could be a lot more expensive. Now, that's not to say that everything will be totally inaccessible, but just like bananas, beef is gonna be more expensive. Products could be a lot more expensive in your new country if you do end up leaving your hometown for a new country. And even, like I said, even within the States, different parts of the United States have different prices on different things, and it's important to keep this in mind before you leave your hometown. So kind of hitting on a last couple of points, your hometown may get significantly more expensive while you're gone. I know this firsthand. I grew up in Nashville. When I left Nashville was relatively cheap by most people's standards. After I left in the preceding years, a lot of things doubled in price. Like rent doubled, food got a lot more expensive, restaurants got a lot more expensive. Everything just got significantly more expensive. And when I came back briefly for a few months, it just blew me away at how expensive it was. I was like, the city is not delivering good value at all. It used to, in my opinion, deliver a lot of good value. That is, your dollar would go really far. And then when I came back, I was like, man, this is way overpriced. Like a lot of this stuff is super overpriced. Half the new businesses are overpriced bars. it just, yeah. Understand that if you leave your hometown and try to come back, it may have gotten significantly more expensive since you left. And if you're in my situation, I don't have a family home to go back to. I'm not inheriting a big house or anything like that. You may have to pay a lot more for the things that you used to pay a lot less for. So keep in mind that if you leave your hometown and you try to come back, that it may not be affordable for you anymore. That's certainly the case with me. I don't know that I'll ever live in Nashville again, simply because it's gotten so much more expensive than it used to be, and it's changing the dynamic of the city. The city used to be relatively blue collar, and now it's moving toward the direction of working professionals and people having to work long hours to be able to afford to live there. It doesn't have the same down-to-earth feeling that it used to have when I grew up there. So that's something to keep in mind, is the very dynamic culture may shift from what you're used to. And kind of the last point I'm going to hit on here is you may feel frustrated when you're returning. I noticed when I returned to Nashville, I felt frustrated at all the change. It changed so much. It felt so alien to me, which was really surprising because I was born there. I was born in Midtown, St. Thomas, if you're wondering. It changed so much from what I was used to. And that really, really shocked me. That really, really shocked me, and it really bothered me on a deep level. And I don't know that I'll ever really get over it 100%. It's hard to deal with change, and not only the change in the city, but the change in people. People I grew up with were no longer the same people. They'd evolved, some for the better, some for the worse. And all that change may be uncomfortable. So recognize that when you leave, it may be for good, and it may be for the best that you leave for good, because coming back just, it may feel like going backwards in a lot of ways. I know that, when I go to different neighborhoods I used to spend time in, it's hard for me to recognize them. Many of them have changed a lot. Lots of new apartment buildings, lots of skyscrapers going up. Traffic is significantly worse than it used to be. It used to be in Nashville, you could just get in your car and drive around for fun. I'd go to this neighborhood and hang out with friends over there, and then I'd drive over to this neighborhood to grab some food, and then I'd drive over to this neighborhood to, maybe catch up with a family member or something like that. And that's not really possible anymore. A lot of the commute and transit times in the city have doubled and tripled. So it's more of a chore to do a lot of these things than it used to be. It's not that fun to drive around in Nashville anymore. It's more of a pain in the rear end, and that doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. The city's not interested in dealing with transit. It's not interested in constructing public transit. From my understanding, it's the largest city in the U.S. with basically really weak public transit system. So keep in mind that your hometown could very well change, and if you try to come back, it could be a really frustrating experience. So I hope this was helpful. If you let me know what you think down in the comments. If you disagree with what I've said, if you disagree with my sentiment and my thoughts on this, let me know what you think. Maybe you went back to your hometown, or you left your hometown, and you have something to say about it. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.